Real generational healing, if I could pass on anything to the next generation, it would be you have a right to be here. You have a right and you are worthy. A calm and rested nervous system is the revolution. Are you from LA originally?
No, Montreal.
Nice. How long have you been here?
I moved here in 2015.
Oh, wow. One time.
Yeah, so like a while, but like been back and forth.
Okay, nice.
I moved to Toronto, I don't know what year. Maybe like 2019.
Nice.
Yeah, no, let's say 2018. Lived there for 2 years. Then I was like, okay, I'm gonna come back to LA and see if like LA is really where I want to like set some roots and like, really be. And then I came and then COVID hit.
Oh, shit. And you got stuck.
And like since COVID, I don't know like how you feel. I just been like, haven't felt like cemented since then.
You haven't?
No.
That's so funny. I just moved here.
Okay.
Like, only a year and a half ago. And so I only know LA post-pandemic.
Oh, really? I always find that interesting when people tell me that. I'm like, you didn't even know LA before?
Didn't. I mean, I had dipped in and out because I'm from the Bay Area. And so I dipped in and out. But to live, like I never expected to live here. And then the pandemic changed everything almost for everybody.
Yeah.
It's honestly been great.
I love it.
Because I think a lot of people left and then a lot of new people came in. And so my community now is really beautiful. Mm-hmm. And then also, of course, like the people from actual LA I really resonate with. It's kind of really nice.
Yeah. Where are you from?
From Oakland.
Okay, so not too far. So
not
that's
too far
why you came in and
yeah.
out.
And so it feels like the next iteration of, it's still California. A lot of the people from the Bay came to LA post-pandemic, and so it feels like this new level 2 of my experience in the Bay right
Do you
now.
feel like it's like the Bay is like as creative as LA is?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe even more so, except that there's not as many opportunities to pursue that creativity professionally. And so it's like, it's a lot of creatives doing it on the side or like doing like really low key about it. People in LA are a lot louder about it and a lot like, see me in this art, you know what I mean? Whereas in Oakland, it's kind of like, I'm a poet. It's like, it's really subtle.
I can so see that, the poets too in Oakland.
Yeah, exactly. There's a big spoken word scene up there. It's a whole thing. I love the soul of the Bay. But it's just easier to be an artist professionally out here, so.
You feel more comfortable being loud about it too,
Exactly,
which is like a necessary
exactly.
part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everybody's being loud, and so it's like, well, let's be loud about it then. Let's create together then. It's like a lot of like, let's build together energy out here, which is cool.
I know, like before I moved here, like you just hear like negative things where it's like, oh, it's fake there, this, that. And I'm like, the people here, like I feel like everybody comes out here with an intention to like pursue their dream. Majority of them are leaving their family, their friends, they're leaving so much behind. So they're like open to connecting to new people. Like they need a community, which is going to tie into what you do. Yeah,
that's actually a really good perspective. I have this theory that LA is what you are. And so if you're...
It's a reflective.
Exactly.
I think so too.
So if you're surface level and fake, you'll find that. You know what I mean? Like it'll reflect that. But if you're genuine and sincere, you'll find that too.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think so too. Okay, so talking about community.
Yeah.
Talk to me about like what ritual is, how it started.
Well, I mentioned earlier, I'm from Oakland, and Oakland is a place that's rooted in community first and foremost, rooted in revolution. It's historically where the Black Panther Party was originated from, and the hippie movement, the Harvey, not Harvey Weinstein, oh my goodness, the Harvey Milks, Jesus. There's a lot of uniting that happened in the Bay Area and a lot of let's move forward together energy. And I feel like I carry that with me. And so when I got to LA, I wanted to sort of recreate that sense of community, that sense of soul that I've always grown up around in the Bay Area here in a place where it is so many people from different parts of the world and so many transients, so many people who don't really feel connected here, you know what I mean? Or feel connected to this place. Connection for me is the name of the game. Like how do we connect deeper to our bodies, deeper to our communities, and deeper to the land around us, the environment around us? And so ritual was sort of born out of that. That idea of how do we create space for genuine connection to happen, and how do we use what we already have, which is the food around us. How do we I don't know what the word is specifically, but essentially reconnect to the things that matter. I tried to dig as much as I could into your story. I noticed with your questions, I was like, wow, she's really informed.
Really digging, sometimes I'll like Google or whatever, but you share, which is amazing. Like your captions are like beautiful and you get like really vulnerable. So I was just like literally sitting there, like that was my research, like reading through.
That's really
reading
cool.
through your captions. But I read a little bit about like your story and like where you were at like mentally before you came across like doing this. So I'm kind of curious about like the backstory because I think that's always really important.
My experience growing up was a bit chaotic. I came from kind of a tumultuous home environment. I'm the oldest of like 7 kids. What that means is I grew up with my parents, and I grew up raising my siblings to a certain extent with them, and also growing up on my own. And it was a lot of me being independent and me having to figure out kind of life on my own because my parents were off doing a million other things, figuring out how to be people themselves, humans themselves, grown-ups themselves, let alone be parents. And so when I was 16, I was incredibly depressed, incredibly anxious, suffered and was diagnosed with bipolar depression and anxiety. And it came to a peak one day when I felt like nothing was going to get better and that no one else was there and available to help me. And so I tried to fix it in the only way that I knew how at the time, by taking my life. And obviously, as I sit here today, I was unsuccessful with that attempt. And I remember waking up on the floor that day after just that huge mistake and feeling like, oh my God, like you idiot, you almost like ruined this opportunity that you have before you. And I've since been to therapy for years and years and years. God bless my therapists, multiple of them. But one word that she, or just phrase that she really gave me that has stuck with me for years was, I don't think you actually wanted to die or to leave. I think you knew that you deserved more, and you knew that you didn't want to be a part of that life anymore. And that sentence really sticks with me because I think she was absolutely right. I just needed an escape from that reality. And I remember waking up on that day and feeling like, okay, we know that we don't want that anymore. We know that we don't want that life, but that's clearly not working, and it's not sustainable anymore. And so where do we go from here? Like, it was as if it like cleared the slate for me and was like, okay, we got to reprioritize. Like, we got to just get clear. And what better way to do that than by first getting out of the environment that's causing you so much harm, and then using what you have, which at the time was EBT, it was food stamps, food, to change the literal vibration that you're vibrating on. Like, how do we use the stuff that we have to change the frequency with which we can even see and experience the world? That's language that I have now. It was more intuitive back then.
I was gonna say, yeah.
It's just kind of developed over time. But at the time I knew that like the first place that I have to start is with the fuel that I'm putting into my body. I recognized pretty early on that there was a relationship between what I was eating and how I was feeling. And when I was eating a lot of dead foods, a lot of foods that inherently lack life force energy, be it heavy red meats or creams, but also specifically like processed foods that come in a box that take up the majority of the shelves at the grocery store, that food is not living. It doesn't have a pulse. It doesn't have a specific timeline where you have to eat it before it like goes bad, essentially. Or if it can last years and years and years, that's essentially not giving you the fuel and the nutrients that you need. And so when I changed that, everything changed.
That's crazy. I actually have heard stories like that before where they're like at the very, very end. I don't know if you know the author Eckhart Tolle, the one who wrote New Earth.
Yeah.
Do you know that's like his story? Like he was like on a bench and he was like considering committing suicide, and like I guess like people get to this space where they're like, I like absolutely cannot live in this reality.
Exactly.
And then when it is not successful or something, like they have like a shift of perspective, they realize like, oh, I didn't want to actually end my life, I just wanted to end that life.
Exactly.
So
exactly. And I think it's a really delicate dance. I wouldn't change my story for the world. Like, I wouldn't change anything about how things played out. However, I think there's ways to get to that level of, okay, things need to change before getting all the way to your rock bottom. You know what I mean? Sometimes it requires the rock bottom, but it doesn't always have to be in that way. If you're recognizing that your environment is toxic and it's not serving you, changing your environment, moving to a new place is a huge way to create that energy of the empty cup, like where you empty out everything, you're starting new, you're starting fresh. That's a clean slate as well. It's another way to get there. Or to say, okay, I'm going to commit to myself and change my whole diet for this amount of time. Like, that's a whole new, it's getting to that place of vulnerability without putting yourself necessarily in harm's way, is a good way to do that.
Speaking about like being in front of a whole new environment, I feel like that's like not taken people don't realize like how powerful that could
be. It
is
so potent.
It really is. And like you also don't realize that like you do play a role depending on who you're around. You know, like whoever you're hanging around, they bring out different chemistry or whatever it is. But like if you're, let's say, around especially family who have known you your whole life, they have a view of who you are, and you almost feel inclined to like
they like
act
hold
out
you
this
to
role.
that mold.
Yeah, exactly. So like when I moved to LA, like that was my thing. Like I'm gonna decide who I want to be. Like I'm living in an environment now that where people are constantly telling me who I am. I feel like I can grow out of some of these like habits I've had, and they're consistently reinforcing that that's who I am. I don't want to be that person anymore, and I feel like the only way I can like reestablish and people like reaffirm this new person I want to be, my environment to reaffirm it would be to start from scratch.
Start from scratch. That is literally the whole reason that I ended up in LA. 2020. So essentially, I went on this path. I ended up leaving my childhood home at 16 and was out in the world, just had to figure it out. And I was like, okay, what kind of person do you want to be? I'm going to start building it from scratch. And wow, that was an up and down journey. And I had a lot of support and guidance from other family members, like my sister, who became a real ally. I moved in with her, and she really helped me get to that next phase of just stability and like just groundedness for a bit. She also had a preconceived notion of who I was and also was still holding me to that some 5 years later. And that ended up, while it was helpful in the beginning, it ended up becoming a challenge too. And I love her to death, of course, and all of my family. But at some point, it's hard to grow in the place where you were planted, you know what I mean? In that place where you became the first version of yourself, it's hard to then become the next version. And I think we continue to like climb this ladder or become these new levels of self. But if you're being held down, if there's like weeds like growing over you, trying to keep you at a certain level, it becomes really hard to flourish in those places. And so you got to break free in whatever way you can. And so anyway, I did that in pandemic. I actually had a whole eat, pray, love moment in 2020, just because everything was kind of collapsing again, another rock bottom in a different way. And I was like, okay, I gotta go. If the world is gonna end tomorrow, because we kind of thought that it was, we didn't know what was gonna happen. I was like, well, I'm gonna go out with a bang. Like I just wanna travel. I just wanna do, like just enjoy it while I'm here as much as possible. And I was like, where can I go right now? And I sat in meditation and I really prayed about it, and was like, okay, God, you lead the way, because I don't know where to go. I don't even know where I can go. Everywhere is basically closed. Like you can't really travel. And so I ended up going to Peru just based off of whim, just because my sister was reading a book at the time called The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't heard of it even.
It is a magical book. He wrote it in like the 90s, I think, early 90s. And it's a book about this guy who follows his intuition to Peru. It's a fictional story, adventure parable, really good read. It's not as intense as the title makes it out to seem. Celestine Prophecy. It's actually super chill. But I'm reading
thinking
it
like The Alchemist.
But that's exactly. Okay. It's a very similar. It's written in a very similar way in that it's a parable. It teaches you about life through this fictional story, which is really cool. And I'm reading it, and I was like, what if I just literally followed in his steps and like went to Peru too? Like, what if I just kept that idea in my mind. And then in a roundabout way, I hadn't said it out loud, but I go on YouTube within like 2-3 days of having this idea, and my whole page is populated with like 3 different videos of like what best foods to eat in Peru and my solo trip to Peru and like best ceviche in Peru. Like, and I was like, whoa, Peru. I was like, okay, like there's something happening here. I'm just gonna entertain it. And I watched one video, and one of the videos, at the end of the video, she was like, oh, I stayed at this Airbnb called blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm gonna look it up. I wonder if it's like still a thing. It was recorded like a year or 2 ago. I look it up. It's like $13 a night or something to stay, something super cheap and affordable. And I'm living in the Bay Area at that time, which is incredibly expensive. If you don't already know, it was absolutely absurd. And so I'm considering where to move in the Bay or to LA or to wherever. And it wasn't as accessible as this Airbnb was presenting itself in Peru. And I was like, okay, can I even travel to Peru right now? And I did a little search. One of the only places open at the time, borders wide open. I look up flights. It's like $150 one way because nobody's flying. It was just like green light.
Yeah, you almost couldn't like not go.
Exactly. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm a firm believer in like trusting the insights like from the universe, those little breadcrumbs that you get. Like if you feel like forward momentum, if it feels like flow, if it feels easy, then there might be something there for you. And so I was one of the first times actually that I really trusted that. And I went, and it ended up being a magical trip, and I stayed for 5 months, and I met some of the most magical human beings, people who encouraged me to write my story and to pursue telling my story through food and like healing in this way. And eventually I ended up moving to LA and really told my story, like started telling it out loud, at least for the first time, publishing my first cookbook, and essentially just following the insight in that one moment of like, what if I just went to Peru? Like just that whisper led me to change my life.
That's such an important point. Yeah. Like I think for me, moving to LA was like maybe one of the first times I really listened to my voice. Like no matter, because everybody around me was saying don't do it, and I did it anyways. And then when I got here, I was like, oh, it's exactly like this is what I needed type thing. And my biggest lesson like till this day is like listen to that voice inside of you.
Trust your intuition. Yeah. It's everything.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it's hard to, before you really start listening to your intuition, it's hard to differentiate your intuition from fear or from anxiety. But honestly, using food, it's been a real tool for me to like...
It keeps it clear
it out and tune in. Yeah. It's been a huge tool to really connect in that way.
Yeah. So do you feel like you wouldn't even be doing what you're doing today in LA if you didn't have that Peru trip?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Okay.
I never expected to be a chef or to be a person in food. I was pursuing a whole other career in events coordination. I was an events coordinator for like a nonprofit.
It kind of fits.
Company. It actually, I was learning a or that I now apply to this career in food. But I didn't have the wherewithal to see or to understand that I could create a life around my passion and to use the skills that I've learned in order to make it sustainable. But I didn't see that like food was something that I was doing, that I was making on my own. I was posting my recipes and stuff since my, like talking about like my depression and healing from my depression. And so I went vegan and started posting recipes and and then that turned into like more vegetarian, plant-based, and started telling that story here and there just for me online. But I never thought it was going to be like a thing that I did. I attribute it, yes, to the book, to reading that book at that time. But it also had a lot to do with it being a pandemic. And we were forced to sit with ourselves for the first time. Like, first of all, my career as an events coordinator was obsolete. We could not gather anymore. So I literally
was it like happening a little bit at that time, or?
Everything kind of closed down in March.
Yeah.
And then we were still working for the company for about, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 months, like just waiting, like planning events, like holding off the people who had events on the calendar. I mean, like, no, just wait.
2 weeks.
Literally that. Yeah. And so it was a lot of that back and forth for a few months. And then eventually, we all had to like find a new way to live and to do something else. And that ended up being the ultimate blessing, such a blessing. Thankfully, I had like a solid place to stay and solid support system around me, which made it sustainable for a few months for me to even gauge, okay, what am I gonna do? Where am I going? What do I even want? Who am I? All the like huge existential questions. And that ended up, leading me to find the answers in Peru. Yeah.
And so was it like somebody there? Like, how did you get to the point where, you were already doing the recipes?
I was already posting them, and I'm always cooking for my family and for my friends. So to clarify, sorry, it's all over the place, the story. But so I've been cooking and creating food as an art form, as therapy in a way, since I had left my childhood home at 16. As a way to, yes, I'm healing my body, but also it's art. It's
like
fun.
An expression,
And with veganism and plant-based eating, you have to be creative, otherwise it gets boring. Like, I just refuse to live off carrots and hummus for the rest of my life. Like, I need it to be tasteful.
Like, the stereotype.
Exactly, right? Like, it gets to be delicious and it gets to be nourishing. And so finding the foods that felt good and finding different flavors to add and different spices and different whatever, like that's like the chef's kiss moment for me. Like, I love the process of it. I was doing that just all throughout, casually posting here and there. And then when I up and left to Peru, I went with this intention to write a book, and I thought it was going to be my Eat, Pray, Love, literally my memoir drama. I'm like 23 at the time. I'm like, I just need to write my memoir. But really, I'm glad that I had that intention and that I went with so much fervor in that direction, because while I was there writing every day, I recognized how imperative and how crucial food was to my story, like how much of a part of my story it was. I couldn't really tell my story without food because it had been the crutch really that had helped me get to a place of mental and emotional stability to even be able to know that I'm worth telling my story, that I can create in this way, that I can, I don't know, follow my passion. It had been so crucial to the story. And then I ended up meeting this really beautiful chef. He was a private chef in Peru at the time. He was like a traveling chef and restaurateur, but he had gotten stuck in Peru at the same time because he couldn't go back to his home country. We ended up hitting it off and like at some event, and he was like, come back with me, I'll make you a meal and you can tell me your story. And it was just one of the most simplest interactions. It's like, oh my gosh, yes, of course I'll come.
Yeah.
It just like really crystallized this idea of like some of the most sacred interactions that you can have usually happen over a meal. And usually there's food involved, there's nourishment involved, there's like, how can I like offer you this gift of sustenance, of nourishment? And I remember just feeling so taken aback and so seen and heard. And I told him my story at the time that I was writing and and everything that I had overcome to get to this place. And he was so supportive, and he was like, well, you absolutely have to write it. It absolutely has to be a cookbook. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And I was like, if I'm going to tell the story of how I healed through food, I should include some of the recipes that really helped me get there.
Yeah, things
and
are like,
so,
yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
it's like I'm meeting, like first I get this insight, this whisper to go. And I'm like, okay, I get over this huge leap of faith to trust my intuition and to go. And then when I'm there, I meet all kinds of beautiful souls who really helped encourage my story, but he's one that sticks out. His name was Murray. He's really beautiful.
Is he still in your life?
Here and there we touch base. He's like, oh, I'm in Australia today. Shout out Murray if you're listening. Love you. Really beautiful human being. That really led me to just having enough courage and encouragement to be able to tell my story.
It's crazy because in your own way, like it's your own like fable, like kind of like
my own, like alchemist story, my own
but like
Celestine prophecy,
like derived from like a different influence with like a food influence.
Yeah, exactly. In my own way. That is interesting. I haven't thought about it in that way. Yeah.
So then it turns into a cookbook. How does the evolution turn into like what you're really doing in LA with like, and that's another thing. Should I be calling them dinner parties? I feel like I shouldn't.
No, you totally can.
Okay.
What's the resistance?
I feel like it's not like
weighty enough, you know?
Like it's not impactful enough.
Yeah.
Like it just sounds like, yeah.
I actually do feel that way too. But no, it's a dinner party. I like that it kind of sounds a little inconspicuous, like you don't know what you're gonna get. Maybe it's a little casual dinner party. Maybe it's the seat where we're gonna talk about the revolution. Like you never know. Like maybe it's it gets to be layered and fun and cute and nourishing. Hence the dinner part of it. But it is also about gathering. It is about coming together and reconnecting to your body and to each other and to the world around you.
How does it go from you're with this beautiful man that inspires the idea of like, wait a minute, like cooking is like the thread amongst my entire story. I'm going to put recipes in here. And then it goes to...
Yeah. So it's kind of just an idea at that point. That insight became significant looking back, but it was really just like we had one conversation and
how
then
it is sometimes.
He left a week later and we never really saw each other again.
And it like shifted your life.
Yeah, literally. God bless that man and God bless whatever came through him because that was magical. But yeah, and so I'm still writing. I'm there for 5 months. I'm writing. And then I start to get this itch at the end of 5 months and I'm like, okay, this is the same feeling that was coming up when I felt like I needed to go to Peru. Like I felt this call. Like it wasn't logical. It didn't really make any sense why I would go to Peru, but I just felt this visceral need to like leave and to go. And I was like, I have that again, but where? Like I can't really place where. And so I tuned back in and I sat in meditation, and I really had like a quite dramatic come to Jesus moment. I'm not religious. I am quite spiritual in that I'm connected to my ancestors and connected to a spirit and a force that's greater than me, whatever we want to call it. But I believe it's just a version of our higher selves. And when we can tune into that voice, that is also what I believe our intuition is. And when you can make space for it, you can really tune in a meaningful way and get guided. And so anyway, I tune in and I'm like, all right, I have this prayer that's, dear God, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? Like, I surrender it to you. Like, lead me. I don't want to choose wrong, because I know if I use my little human brain, sometimes I can try and force things that aren't supposed to be forced, or try and go in a direction that wasn't necessarily for me. But like, if anyone is up there, literally, please lead me. And it was quite dramatic. Like, I'm crying. It's like meditation. This is over the span of like a week that I'm having, I'm tuning in this way. But I remember the last day was the most dramatic. It's when I'm like crying and stuff. And I'm like, okay, like, what is this feeling? Like, I feel this urge, but I don't know. I don't know what the logical next step is going to be. I thought I was going to travel from there. I thought maybe Brazil, because I'm right there in Peru, or maybe Colombia, or maybe somewhere else. I really had no idea. But the whispers I kept getting were LA. It was like, LA, go to LA. And I was like, LA? Like, I just escaped from the States. Like, I felt like I'm already like in this, I don't know, like ready to, I don't know, expand my horizons.
Worldly.
I'm cultured now. Like, why would I go back to California? And so I'm like tuning in and I'm hearing LA, but I'm like getting that sense of LA, and I'm like really resisting it, especially because I'm from the Bay Area. We kind of have this stigma about people who are from the Bay who go to LA, and it's just like boring, bland. Because there is a lot of stigma in LA about like it being surface level or it being pretentious or whatever. We talked about this earlier. I think LA is what you are. And I think if you are genuine and sincere, you get that here reflected times 1,000. And if you're not that, you'll get that too. You know what I mean? You get whatever you bring. Yeah.
It's one of those cities where it's like, if you're not that and it reflects back, it's like,
it's daunting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you really have to be tuned in, and you really have to know who you are here. Otherwise, LA will try to tell you who you are. But anyway, so I'm sitting in meditation, I'm tuning in, and I keep getting this whisper of LA. And at some point, I'm just like, all right, if it's going to be LA, like, dear God, you have to make it easy. Like, let it flow. I'm not going to look for anything. I'm not going to look for a place. I'm not going to go out of my way to find a spot in LA. Like, almost like a kid, like, throwing a tantrum. Like, all right, if I have to go to LA, whatever. I had this moment, and I, like, kind of just surrender it. And I'm like, all right, whatever. If it's supposed to be LA, then it'll flow, and it'll be easy, and it'll just, what is meant to be will be. I get out of meditation that day, at that point of surrender. And like any, young girl, I immediately go on Instagram, because as one does, when you're programmed in that way. I go on Instagram just because whatever, habit. And one of the first posts I see is from this girl named Amina, who I had known from the Bay Area. And we were acquaintances. We weren't really friends, but we had followed each other on social media. And she had, one of the first posts I see was a story post that said, "Hi, this is da-da-da-da, this is Amina. I'm looking for a roommate in my downtown LA loft. Submit, like, right here."
You're like looking up, like, God.
What? Yeah. And later she and I was like, literally, like, okay, the timing is too spot on.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna entertain it. She goes on to like post pictures of the space. It's literally one of the spaces, or like the aesthetic of a space that I've put on my mood boards like years and years before. Wow. It's just with the exposed brick and plants, and Amina is super into astrology, and that's like a language I speak too. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of alignment here. And I was like, I'm just gonna shoot my shot, and I'm sure she's getting a lot of people like responding and da-da-da. If it's meant to be, it will be. I'm not gonna force anything. Like, I'm resistant. Like, I do want to stay in Peru or stay traveling, but I can't deny this call to LA. And I shoot my shot, and I'm like, hey, this is me, da-da-da, I'm applying for blah, blah, blah. And she later tells me that she knew she had gotten like 50 to 100 like responses like on that post immediately. Because it's LA, there's always people coming in and out trying to move in. And she knew immediately once I submitted, she was like, it was a full body fuck yes. Excuse my language. She was like, it was a full body bleep yes. Yeah. What ended up happening is I move in like 2 weeks later, like almost immediately, like just like, she's like, yeah, come, like it's you're the one. And I come, she ends up becoming one of my best friends in LA, like one of the closest people to me. She's an incredible photographer. I move in, I tell her what I'm doing. She's like, oh, amazing, let's shoot it. I'll shoot your book. And so she's also a brand strategist. She helps me like map out the whole like mock-up of what this book is gonna look like. We shoot all the recipes together in our house. Like, I have goosebumps telling this story just because it was just alignment. And I could not have done it if I wasn't aware enough to tune in, you know what I mean? And to allow myself to be guided. Because if I would have had it I would have been traveling other places. I might have ran into some situations that might not have been for me because I was resisting the flow. But because I went with the flow and because I just kind of allowed, I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be. And now we together wrote my cookbook, Alive Again, The Gift of Eating Well.
So much.
Yeah.
Okay. First,
yeah, girl, it's a lot. It's a lot.
First, I want to kind of highlight like the experience of tuning in because like you can think you're on a certain path and you think you know what's best for you, or like even you had inclination at one point in time and it brought you to a certain place. And you may have thought like, what if you were in the mindset of like, I'm going to be in Peru for the next 5 years. And then all of a sudden something inside of you is not feeling the same, but you don't know what's next because you had already made this game plan to be there for 5 years. So I think it's like, I think that period needs to be highlighted a little bit, that like that can happen where you're not resonating with the plan that you set out for yourself, and like how to tune in and like hold space for yourself during that time, because it's like you essentially feel lost.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting? I think there is something to be said, about creating the plan, but leaving room for flow. We used to say that actually in the events industry when I was big in creating events for the corporate industry, is you can create, you can plan, you can have the run of show, you can have all the things planned out to a T, but you have to still allow room for people to naturally migrate where they're supposed to migrate and flow where they're supposed to, and leave room for organic interactions to happen. Because if it's too planned, you might miss some things. It's not as great of an experience essentially for the guest or for the people who are hosting. And so I think that can be applied to life as well, right? Like create the plan, create the vision, create or write down what you feel most called to, and then tune in and allow it to flow and come together in its own time, in its own way. Because sometimes you can't even fathom certain things or certain ways that it's going to come together, certain people that you'll have to meet in order for you to get to where you're supposed to go, or just different directions, different paths that you can take to get there. Like, I don't think it's all up to us. I think we have different forces that also conspire to help us get to where we're meant to be.
Yeah, I think that's like maybe the limitation even with like the concept of manifestation. It's like you're coming up with it in your own mind, but what could potentially be possible is like something you couldn't come up with.
Right? You can come up with the what, but you got to leave the how up to the people or to the energy that might actually know the best way.
Yeah. And hopefully like that period of time of you figuring out and transition, I guess hopefully it's not too long. Like I feel like I've gone through periods where it's like I know what I'm doing is not right, but I don't know the next thing, and it's like gaps of time, like year plus.
Yeah. In that year plus, you learn so much about yourself. Whether it's immediately applied to the vision that you thought you were working towards, or if you're planting other seeds for visions that will sprout later in the future. You're building this new version
of yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not linear. It's this kind of spiraling up thing that I sort of envision, and we revisit things from different and higher perspectives as we go. We're planting seeds along the way, and they sprout. Some of them sprout while others are like gestating under and like building their roots, and it gets to be kind of an everything everywhere all at once kind of growth pattern I've noticed, more so than a starting here, going there.
Right.
Yeah.
That made me think of like the way you break up your meals at Ritual.
Yeah.
With it starts with seed, sprout.
Yeah. So for the first Ritual dinner, the first course was seed. Seasonality is really important to us. The process of growth is really important to us. And so that's reflected with our farm partners who we partner with. The last 2 times have been Sunrise Organic Farms, but we have partnerships with farms all over Southern California, local farms that we are really grateful for. I truly believe that the farmer is the hero of our society. They don't get nearly enough credit. There's so many reasons for them not to do the backbreaking work that they do, and yet they do it, and they feed our entire society. And it really blows my mind, honestly. And so we created Ritual as a way to bring people in and connect with their bodies, but to also like lift up the farmer. We invite them and they have a seat at our table always.
Cool.
We introduce them, we give them a whole sort of stage moment where they can talk about what they do and their company and how other people can support. But and so we wanted to sort of touch on that a little bit with the sequence of the meal. So it was seed and then sprout and then blossom, or maybe it was bloom, and then the fourth course was flourish, and it was the dessert.
Love that. And you cook all the meals yourself?
It's me and my partner, Rachel Bussey. Yeah, we do it together. She's a technically trained chef. We actually also met in the Bay and then reconnected in LA, and it just was very synchronistic. And we're both on the same page of like wanting to heal through food. And so we do it together.
And you guys choose like the most beautiful locations too.
Thank you.
Like, oh my God. Like when I think of like my picture perfect like life, and I'm like, oh, I'll have dinner parties.
Yes.
And like when I thought about dinner parties, it was like the vision of like when you had all the candles and it was like the view of LA. I was like, this is perfection. Like this is exactly what I envision as like the ideal dinner party, but you're doing it from such like a heart-centered space.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful sentiment. We really are so grateful that we get to do what we do and to be able to share our core messages in this way of connecting and reconnecting and caring about people and planet, but to also do it in a beautiful and tasteful way is kind of everything to us.
So let's talk a little bit more about like the farming, because I really don't know much. Like the extent of my knowledge was like when I was telling you before, I'm like, when I get strawberries at Trader Joe's and I get strawberries at the farmer's market, it's like night and day. Like I literally call my mom and I'm like, Mom, you don't understand. The strawberries you eat are like plastic, okay? You have to have the farmer strawberry. So like, and then I brought it up and you're like, oh, that's like
it's a whole thing
topic. So I'm curious to like get a little bit more into like the farm to table, regenerative farming, all that stuff that I know nothing about.
It's so funny because in America, we've sort of become accustomed to convenience and ease and accessibility versus, I'll say this, growth takes time. And I think in a world that is rooted in capitalism and production and go, go, go and do, buy, produce, it's hard to have enough patience and appreciation for things that do take time, like seasonality. Like there's a reason why certain things only grow in certain seasons. Like strawberries, for example. Strawberries are at their peak in the summertime because your body is like, the sun is out longer, you're outside longer, you're using a lot more energy. You need like the qualities of a strawberry, which are like vitamin C and like all this like heightened energy. Fruits, berries especially, are electrifiers, and so they keep you awake and they like get you like up in energy. And so it's actually abnormal that we have access to strawberries in the winter time. Like they shouldn't necessarily be growing. In California, it's hard because our weather is conducive to growing things all year round, but our bodies are not. Biologically, our bodies have not evolved as quickly as our level of production has and level of importation and import and export has. And so I personally am a farmer's market stan. Like the farmer's market is the only place that I can go to and feel a real connection to my food because I'm meeting the farmer. Mostly it's the people who are actually growing your food or work for the company who's growing your food. You can talk to them about like, how is the weather this week? Like, how is that going to impact my strawberries or my tomatoes? If it was extra rainy this week, sometimes that has a chemical reaction and that'll make your tomatoes more salty. And that's really, I love like those like really cool factors and stuff. Or taste more salty and have more sodium deposits and stuff. And it's really interesting. But if you're getting your strawberries from Trader Joe's, who's importing them from Peru, you know what I mean? Like, not only are you not connected to your farm, to the food that you're actually eating, but your body can't really process it in the same way because it's not from the same environment that you're living in. It's not in the season that your body is most able to digest and produce it. It's picked at before ripeness and then so that it has enough time to get to you and be ripe, which interrupts a whole growing process, a whole level of nutrients that you're missing out on now because they're trying to like save time and save money and so that they don't go bad before they get to you. But it's like you're missing out on certain key nutrients that happens in like the later stages of the growing phase. And there's so many layers, not to mention the environmental impacts of like what happens when you ship things on big old trucks that have all kinds of carbon emissions or big planes. It's a disorder that we've kind of become accustomed to, the way that we eat here in America. And it's actually really disheartening. Like the deeper you get into how food is produced, who's producing the food and how they're kind of taken advantage of as well, in terms of like the farmers it gets dark. And
Yeah.
so I find that the way that I can feel the least guilt and feel the best in my body about the food that I'm eating is by supporting my local farmers at the farmers market. And sometimes I feel like the prices do equal out. Personally, if you're buying strategically, like for certain meals. But I know a lot of people kind of give me pushback. They're like, the farmer's market is more expensive.
Yeah.
But I have this theory that's like, you can either pay the farmer now or you can pay the pharmacy later. You're going to pay the price either way. And it's like, you're either going to cheat yourself and not get the nutrients by buying that cheaper produce, or you're going to connect to your farmer, to your farm, to your body, to the environment, to get the nutrients that you actually need, and then you'll be more well. You'll be more able to move through life in a way that you might not be as able to without your key nutrients that you need.
Is that the main like tip you give people? Like try just to buy directly from farmers? Like, is there anything else? Because I'm just thinking like even where I'm from, like I know that there's like a market once a week. I don't know if it goes on in winter. I think it might. So yeah, like it might be harder in different parts.
Yeah, winters are super tough.
Yeah.
And I fully recognize my California privilege. I don't know what it's like to live in an environment that has like super cold winters, like in Canada in the East Coast or anywhere else around the world. I would say there's a reason why people have grown food for millennia, grown their own food. Well, there's all kinds of economic reasons, but specifically just because you can have control over what you grow, you know what you grow, and then there's like this whole process of preserving and canning and doing all these things. And then I think there is a way to use what you have at like grocery stores, but still eating seasonally. So if it's winter, your body is more prepared for like the heavier squashes and like sweet potatoes, carrots, root vegetables, things that grow in the ground, which you can grow in the winter, which do thrive in the winter, and which your body is more able to process because we've biologically adapted to going within in the winter. It's colder, so we stay inside. We want to stay warm. That's why we put on weight in the winter. It's because we're trying to hibernate. Your body's literally trying to hibernate. We're really just a more complicated animal at the end of the day. And I think we forget that.
We forget, like you're saying these things. I'm like, oh yeah, it's true. Like,
it's really
so I
simple.
guess like it come down to like, just do your research and like look back. Like,
I know. I even ask like a couple generations back, if you're lucky enough to have your grandparents alive or your parents or anybody of those age brackets, be like, what was it like for you guys before when it came to food, when it comes down to food? Did you grow your own food? Who taught you how to do it? Who taught you how to cook? Connecting in that way has been really helpful for me and really just connected me to a new level of what's possible with how I eat, because the way that society and the things that I've learned from the internet or just like seeing and picking up on habits here in this generation, again, I think a lot of it is disordered and it's like not necessarily rooted in what's best for us.
Yeah, I think we really like forget. Like I can't tell you how many times I'm like, okay, what's like going to Trader Joe's, let's say, and like buying things that I could just throw into the microwave. So I spend the least amount of time. Like, I actually enjoy cooking, but like, you know, on a day to day, I'm like, oh, it's nice to just be able to, and it's like, it's terrible.
I mean, first of all, I'm a Trader Joe hoe. I do love Trader Joe's, even though they could chill on the amount of plastic that they use for their produce. They do have some really great like cheaper like healthy alternatives, like hemp seeds for $5, which is crazy, or I don't know, they're like vegan alternatives for like oat milk and butter and stuff. Doesn't have crazy ingredients or crazy like canola oils or like bad stuff, dyes or preservatives as much as say like other grocery stores do. And so I do actually appreciate having access to stores like Trader Joe's and Sprouts and I was going to name some other ones, but those are my favorites.
Okay.
But again, I think cooking your own meal as much as you can really has an energetic imprint and an energetic influence on your body more so than anything else. Food and cooking, it's magic in a way, in that you're pouring your energy into this creation, whether you realize it or not. Even if you go to a restaurant and you're eating from there, they're putting their energy into that meal as well. And so if they're having a bad day, there's an energetic imprint that you're consuming and that is now a part of you that you do have to consider. And I really enjoy cooking my own meals because I do get to, it becomes this act of self-love, of showing myself that I'm worthy of this nourishment, of pouring love into this meal, and just taking care of myself in the way that I always wanted to be taken care of. Like, it's an affirmation of the love that I deserve. And I think more of us, specifically in the BIPOC community, like, need to reaffirm that we are worthy of love, and we are worthy of nourishment, and we are worthy of high quality, high vibrational foods. You can buy all those things with EBT, you know what I mean? There are resources to be able to make that accessible for all. And I think the more that we do that, the better we'll feel as a community, and the better we'll be able to connect not only with ourselves, but with each other.
I love that concept of like, I'm worth it. I'm worth the time. I'm worth the care. I'm worth the attention. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crucial. It's crucial.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about high vibrational food.
Yeah.
So I was like, in the notes that I sent you, I was like, oh, like, I have like a very sensitive stomach.
Yeah.
And I love to eat. Like, I love to go out. And like, majority of the time, I'm like sick after I go.
Wow.
After I eat out. So especially like if I'm in a bad place, like mentally, emotionally, or I have something big that day. Like today, I wasn't going to take a chance. Like today I had like a full salad or whatever, because I was like, if I eat something that's not going to agree with me, my entire energy is going to be different.
Just
like
thrown.
I'm going to be like,
Yeah.
my body's going to be like in survival mode, because it operates like instantly. So I was like researching high vibrational food. I didn't even, that was a term I had never even heard of. Like, I think that it like came to me
because it was supposed to. Yeah.
Yeah.
You needed it.
And I started looking into it, and I was like, oh, like there's like a list of these different types of food, and like talking about the frequency in food and stuff like that. I haven't gone like too deep into it, but I do feel like it makes a really big difference. So I was like curious about your experience with that entire concept.
Yeah. High vibrational food is kind of a layered conversation. It's like, you could be referencing like alkaline foods, which is a whole other thing, but ideally it's this idea that like it's the least processed kinds of foods. They're closest to the source, like as close to the ground as you can get it. Either you're growing it yourself, or you're buying it from farmers who have just brought it over from the farm and you're getting it from the market, or stuff like that. It's not processed. It's not sitting on a shelf necessarily. It's things that are going to help you amplify your energy as opposed to draining your energy when you eat it. In the Black community specifically, we have a type of food called soul food, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which ironically is some of the most heavy, dense foods that absolutely drain you of your life force when you eat them. Heavy mac and cheeses, which is my personal kryptonite. Yeah. I love a good big mac and cheese. Or like super sugary, like baked sweet potatoes, also delicious. Or like greens, which are soaked in like fat, like animal fat and stuff like that. So it's like, while they're delicious and while I understand the history of them, we used what we had when we could. And that became this sort of act of love to create this meal with the limited resources that we had as a Black community. And now I think it's important to realize that we're not there anymore, and we do have access to high vibrational foods. And we get to reimagine what that can look like. Yeah, I think it's important to note that there's a reason that they say listen to your gut. There's all kinds of science now that exists to show you that your gut-brain connection, it's called your ENS system. I think it's endocrine something nervous system or something like that. But your ENS system is essentially as smart, if not smarter, than your brain. And it's constantly sending signals directly from your gut directly to your brain. And so if you're eating something that has a negative effect on your body, it's immediately sending signals to your brain to say, like, shut down or do this or don't. You know what I mean? It has an immediate influence. And so when you do eat higher vibrational foods and you eat as fuel, I think you give your body a chance to like be in right relationship with itself. Like specifically, I was preparing for this podcast and I wanted to make sure my brain was firing on all cylinders. And so I have this breakfast that I eat that's called my brain health breakfast. And it's a little bit of salmon that I had left over from last night. It's greens, it's avocado, and it's some olive oil drizzled on top, and then sometimes it's toast, because those are all foods that are super high in omega-3s, super high in like healthy brain fats. There's fish oils in there, which are also great for the brain. And so that's communicating. When I eat that, it goes into my gut, it communicates to my brain that, oh, we're good. Like, we're safe. We're not in fight or flight. We don't have to shut down. We don't have to over digest. You know what I mean? We're not spending all of our energy digesting this crazy heavy food. Like it just gives me the fuel that I need to be able to operate fully. I think there's definitely a conversation to be had about what are the best foods for our body, because I think every body is different, and it's important to tune into like what feels best in your body and tune out of what doesn't, even if that's what the general population may be eating.
Yeah, like talking about my stomach being really sensitive, and like I'm like looking into like probiotics, prebiotics, and like I heard kimchi is really good, so I'm like eating kimchi, but when I eat it, I actually get inflamed. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, like kimchi is on every list for gut health, and when I eat kimchi, it doesn't sit well. Yeah. Like I actually have it in my fridge right now. I keep buying it, like trying to make it work.
You're like, I want it to work.
Yeah. Because it's like the top of the list and I like the taste, but like it doesn't work for me. So yeah, everybody is different.
Yeah. You have to trust. And I think there's definitely something to be said about experimenting and trying things and doing it with the intention to be like, okay, I'm going to try this new food in conjunction with other foods that I know work for me, that I'm familiar with. So say it's kimchi and rice and avocado or something that you know doesn't harm you. I'm assuming that those foods don't harm you. And then trying it out. And then if you notice, I don't feel as great when I added that kimchi, or I don't feel as great when I added that goat's milk yogurt versus like cow milk yogurt or whatever. For example, that's one that I'm trying out lately, is how do I incorporate certain animal products back in, like yogurt for the probiotics in a way that doesn't harm me, because cow's milk yogurt really does not sit well with me, like the level of lactose in there. But goat's milk yogurt does. And so I'm like figuring out ways to like it's a work in progress all the time. And you get to figure it out. You get to experiment. You get to just flow. And if kimchi doesn't work for you, forget the kimchi. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an experiment. Like to the point where I actually like got tested. I got every test, blood test, every test possible, thinking something's wrong, ready to go on medication if need be. And then she ends up telling me like, you just need to start testing different food and cutting things out of your diet that doesn't work for you. It's that simple.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I don't need to, nothing's wrong. I don't have a disease. Like, no.
Yeah, no, you just got to figure out your body. And I think that I'm glad you brought that up. That actually was a really helpful part of my journey with healing through food, is getting a food allergy test and figuring out what foods I was allergic to. I got mine through my acupuncturist, but you can just Google them. Or you can reach out to any like alternative health practitioner, and they usually can provide them. Sometimes traditional Western doctors, depending, but usually like alternative health providers will be able to offer them. And a lot of people are allergic to things like garlic or onion, like super irritating foods. And it's like, if every meal you're having has one of those ingredients, that's why you feel sick.
Wrong.
Yeah. But it's like, no, you just have to like eliminate certain foods. That was a huge one. Figure out what foods you're allergic to, figure out what foods work best for your body, and go from there.
I'm curious about the nervous system, like the connection to, that was another thing on my list of questions. I was like, and that was another thing that just came to me like out of nowhere. I was like, this year, like I guess it was in January, I was like, I just want to do things, be around people, engage in activities, whatever it is that feels calm to my nervous system. Because talking about listening to your inner voice, like I don't think that I was practicing that enough. So I was doing things that I felt like in my mind I should do, but my body didn't feel aligned. So this time, or at this like chapter of my life, I'm like, whether it makes sense to my mind or not at the time, I'm just going to do what feels internally good to me. So I'm curious, like your thoughts on either the relationship that food has to your nervous system and or how you like filter decisions through the feeling you get there.
I actually love this conversation because I personally believe that a calm and rested nervous system is the revolution. Specifically for the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous people of color, because we've had to exist in such a state of fight or flight for most of our lives, to figure out a way where you can exist and live and be in a state of peace, in a state of calm, in a state of just like rested, exhale, like assuredness. I think that is where generational healing really starts. Because when you're go, your fight or flight, your cortisol levels are through the roof, your body can't fully process food, for one, but also just you can't fully be present in the moment. You're interrupting so many growth cycles, you know what I mean? I don't necessarily know the exact science that's happening with it. But I know when we eat foods that are like crazy stimulants, like we're relying on caffeine or sugar all the time to be able to get through the day.
Or even the speed at which you eat.
Or the speed at which you eat, or you're on your phone while you're eating, you're not paying attention, you're not giving your body the chance that it needs to be fully present with that meal. It takes a lot of energy to digest food and to process fuel and turn it into the nutrients that you need. And I think we need to be better about giving our bodies a chance to actually do that and be present with it. There's this book that I love called Rest is the Revolution by Trisha Hersey. She created this organization called the Nap Ministry, and she speaks a lot about how resting is the revolution.
It really is.
It really is.
It really is.
And when you can give yourself a chance to like, oh, I don't have to produce all the time. I get to rest, and like, I don't have to have it all figured out. I think it goes back to what we were saying about creating room for allowing. Like when you can step back and take a nap and rest and kind of let things fall into place a little bit. You don't have to control it all the time. You don't have to figure everything out. Like you get to allow things to fall where they may.
That's like a topic I've been speaking about, like the friends, people I work with. It's like even on like a Sunday where like it's like the universal day to like relax.
Of rest, yeah.
I still feel a sense of guilt if I'm not being productive.
Yeah.
Like I barely can give myself 20 minutes of just being without feeling like I need to be doing something.
Yeah.
And like, when I was reading some of your captions, you were talking about how like when you're in nature or you're on the farm, like you feel connected and you're kind of disassociated from the narrative of our worth being attached to what we produce or what we even do for a living. Like even though what you do now for a living is really beautiful and purposeful, it's still what you do, you know?
Yeah, that is such an interesting conversation. I think about that a lot too. Cooking specifically started as my meditation practice. Like it's this thing that affirmed for me that I am worthy of love, I am worthy of care, I am worthy of quality, like we mentioned. And while that is beautiful, the moment that I put out this project that said, I cook now and I do this, it became this thing where now anytime I step in the kitchen, I'm like, should I be filming this? Should I record this? Should I like be producing?
Yeah.
And I'm grateful in that I'm at a point of self-awareness now where I can stop and be like, that's trauma, that's programming, that's Western society trying to tell you that you have to do and do and do
every
to
moment
be
needs
valuable,
to be monetized.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Or like you're gonna miss the moment, fear of missing out. It's like that's not real. That is like fear-based. And while it might feel scary and real in the moment, it's okay to sit with that, but your value is not tied to what you do. It's not tied to how much you can produce or how much content you can make. And you're still a person and you're still going to be a loving and kind human being at the end of the day, even if you don't produce the amount of content that the next person does. And if that is your value or your definition of success, then you're still winning. I think we all need to redefine what success looks like for us and what it feels like in our body, you know? Because success for me feels like being able to rest. Like it feels like being able to be abundant in rest, abundant in resources, abundant in vitality and health and well-being, and opportunity and freedom and creativity, but also abundant in rest. And that might not be equivalent to producing and producing and producing all the time. And so specifically as it pertains to content and social media. And so I think when we can redefine what success looks like for us, it gets easier to navigate those moments of guilt when you don't produce. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's such an important thing to redefine.
Yeah.
That was a question I was like consistently asking in these episodes, like how do you define success? Because I just feel like the definition we've all adopted is outdated.
Yeah.
And it's like not working.
Yeah. Also, I like you said adopted, because it's like it wasn't even ours. We just kind of took it on.
Right.
Yeah. I think we have to make it our own.
Yeah. So that's why just talking about it, like, and each person you ask has a completely different answer. So I feel like if we speak about it more and it's like spread a little bit more, somebody could be listening to this, hearing this, and they're like, I resonate with that definition.
Right.
I'm going to adopt that one now. So
or
it's
you
amazing.
can take pieces, from each answer, you know, and your idea of what success can look like gets expanded.
Is there any other, like, you feel like old social construct or like belief system that was like imposed that you've consciously tried to break out of?
along the lines of like needing to apologize for being a woman who is professional in any capacity. I find that like women who are in professional spaces, whether you're an artist or you're in corporate America or you're whatever it is you do, I feel like we kind of tiptoe still, or we like feel like I don't want to be too loud, or I don't want to be too emotional, or I have to show up like extra masculine to prove that I'm worthy of being here. Absolutely not. Like, I'm just worthy of being here because I'm a person who went through some stuff to get here, and that is enough. I am worthy of being here because my ancestors have fought for me to be here, and that is enough. And I don't know, I just really want to let go of that need to apologize for my existence as a woman. Absolutely not. I just no longer resonate.
That is the craziest concept.
It's so absurd.
Like when you just listen to the sentence.
Literally. It's like, what?
Insane.
But it's like, we have that.
But I know what you're
DNA.
talking about.
Yeah. And I'm like, no. I feel like real generational healing, if I could pass on anything to the next generation, it would be, you have a right to be here. You have a right, and you are worthy of the highest vibrational standards of living, highest vibrational foods, the highest quality of life. You don't have to sell your soul for $1. You get to be abundant in rest. You get to be abundant in vitality. You get to be abundant in community. We get to reconnect. We get to be connected in a real way. And you don't have to just fall by the whims of where society would take you, you know what I mean? And just be sort of influenced by the loudest voice in the room. You get to tune into what your inner voice sounds like and decide where you'll go from there.
I love that. That was really basically going to be my last question. Nice. And you just answered it so beautifully.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
So
this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation with you.